Let's go to the phones. We got Bob Holt, the one and only from the Democrat-Gazette. Bob is the inconspicuous Bob Holt today, which is defined as not readily noticeable. I don't know if I would go with that. Maddie T chose that one today. I noticed you, Bob, when we bumped into each other at the store because of your Green Bay Packers mask. But how you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you guys?
We're all right. So you got to cover the draft yesterday with Isaiah Joe heading to the 76ers. Any surprise as to his skill set to the needs of the Sixers, or does it seem like it's a pretty solid fit?
Oh, are you talking about like where he was picked, or just how I think he'll fit in there?
Well, how he fits into the I mean, who knows what's in the mind of Daryl Morey right now? But for what the Sixers need and what they get from Isaiah Joe, does it seem like it's a good fit?
Yeah, I think so. I know that they feel like they needed shooters, and of course we all know Isaiah's a good shooter. I mean, Ben Simmons, the number one pick, who played in the SEC for a year at LSU, and I think he's David Patrick's godson. But David was a big reason that he ended up that Simmons ended up at LSU. He's known as a really good playmaker, a pretty good all-around player, but not a great jump shooter. And they made some trades too. So it's funny. I didn't realize it until I was Googling some stuff the other day, but there were rumors out there that the Sixers had told Isaiah they were going to pick him with one of their picks. They had multiple picks. And, of course, it made me think of what Eric Musselman said the other day, that, he's been in draft rooms where a GM promised like 13 guys that you're our pick, you're our guy. He said that then the team had only one pick, So you don't really know how much of this to believe, but it did seem like I saw Isaiah going to the Sixers in a lot of mock drafts, so it sounded like, they zeroed in on a guy they wanted to add to their roster. So, it's a team with a lot of talent, kind of underachieved. They brought in a veteran coach who's, won a championship, Doc Rivers. And, of course, Doc was I guess I shouldn't call him by his first name. I don't really know him, but he was Orlando's coach. Eric was there with him in Orlando. So I got to imagine that they probably had a lot of conversations about Isaiah.
As far as Mason Jones is concerned, not being drafted just kind of plays right into his story as a basketball player. Doesn't it seem to fit? And I don't know what'll happen with him. And I always got the two-way deal with the Rockets. But just a guy who's always been doubted throughout his entire career. And I think that seems to be the same thing leaving Arkansas as an SEC Player of the Year, but undrafted in 2 rounds.
Yeah, I mean, he was projected as a possible late-round pick. I mean, I'd see him getting picked anywhere maybe in the 50s. Well, if they're projecting you maybe to be one of the last 10 picks, that's obviously no guarantee you're going to get picked. And like you said, I mean, Isaiah's a guy that wasn't really recruited out of high school. He went to a prep school, wasn't really recruited out of there. Went to junior college, wasn't getting a lot of love there either. Arkansas offered him. I think UCA had offered him. And I think Oklahoma State started recruiting him late in the process, but at that time I think he already knew he wanted to go to Arkansas. So, yeah, he's a guy that is used to proving people wrong. And, it's obviously always nice to get drafted, whether it's NFL, NBA, whatever it might be. Only 60 guys get drafted, and really you're talking about players around the world now with the international players involved. So it's a pretty elite group of guys who get drafted. And, so, guys obviously have made it to the NBA through free agency. And so he'll have that shot with Houston. Mason Jones will, and signing a 2-way contract's a good thing. That allows you to swing between the NBA and the G League. I mean, we don't even know if there's going to be a G League schedule this year, probably. But, I'm sure Mason's super motivated. And, that chip on his shoulder's got a little bit bigger, and that'll just, make his chances and increase his chances of playing in the NBA. He's going to play pro basketball somewhere, whether it's here or overseas. I mean, somebody's going to pay Mason Jones to play basketball. I'm sure of that.
Bob Holt here with us on Halftime. Bob, keep it with Mason just for a second before we move move away from the draft. When you look at his story and kind of how he's kept grinding, and you've heard the stories and the reports, just how much more fit he's got, how much bigger and stronger he's got. You heard the stories of the 98 for 100 at the free throw line. But for me, I think the fact that he gets drafted to the Rockets, and we've talked about how much of just a bona fide scorer that Mason Jones is. When you factor that in with everything that's happening with the Houston Rockets right now, whether Russell Westbrook's going to be with the Rockets long-term, being traded there. We've already heard about what James Harden might be demanding a trade to the Brooklyn Nets. And I say that just to say, for being a scorer that he is and always just grinding and trying to prove people wrong, Bob, I feel like there's a path for Mason Jones to probably work his way into the lineup, particularly if a guy like a Russell Westbrook and a James Harden move on to different deals. And there's a spot right there for Mason Jones to take.
Well, yeah, I don't know if they'd necessarily step in for James Harden, but I think I know what you're saying, that he maybe could earn
work his way into the lineup.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting dynamic, because normally, and we know things aren't normal, but a player would get drafted or sign a free agent deal in the latter part of June. They go play in the summer league in Las Vegas or Orlando, and they'd make an impression, and then they'd go to training camp, and sort of the team would have a pecking order, and then that might change based on training camp. But a guy like Isaiah Joe and Mason Jones, you can see them both going to a summer league and helping themselves in the pecking order. But there's no summer league. Guys I think the season starts December 22nd, which is, just a little over a month from now. So these guys are going to hit the ground running, and we'll see what happens. But, yeah, I think Mason's definitely a performance-based guy. He obviously put up great numbers, and I know there may be people say, well, he's not, what he did in the SEC won't translate to the NBA because, everybody's quicker in the NBA and faster and all this kind of stuff. All I know is whatever level it's been on the last few years, Mason Jones has produced at a high level, whether it's been, high school, junior college, SEC at Arkansas. So I certainly wouldn't want to bet against him. And, also could be a situation like a Patrick Beverly, who got drafted late in the second round, and then went overseas and played in Greece and Russia, I think, for like 3 years. Mm-hmm. And then I think 24, 25, and signs with, the Rockets, I believe it was. And so, there's a lot of different avenues to the NBA, and getting drafted obviously helps free agency. But I certainly wouldn't want to bet against Mason Jones playing in the NBA.
I think when you look at how the SEC just dominated the NBA draft last night, 12 overall picks for the SEC last night. 4 of the 14 lottery picks that came out, which is the first 14 picks of the draft, came from Georgia, Auburn, Bama, and Vanderbilt. And, Bob, that was even before a Kentucky player got drafted, and that team won the league by 3 games last year. I think it was just crazy. And the thing, when you look at overall with the SEC and the talent pool, Eric Musselman talked about it this morning on the Morning Rush. It just proves the power of the recruiting that these guys can do here in the SEC. And the SEC in basketball is really – it's been trending upward, but I think last night proved that the SEC is pretty darn dominant in basketball.
Yeah, and like you said, those first 4 players, I'll take none of them from Kentucky. I think Kentucky ended up having 2 first-round picks. But Matt Zimmerman tweeted something. I think I got this right, that the Big 12 and the Big 10 each had 4 picks total. Yep. So you think about 8 picks. I mean, and when you think about college basketball, most people think of the ACC, the Big 10, the Big 12 first probably, and then they think about the SEC and the Big East or something. So, the draft isn't the be-all, end-all, but it definitely shows that, these coaches are bringing in a lot of good young talent. And most of the guys that got picked, were freshmen. And it's just so crazy. When I was growing up, you had guys like, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Bill Walton and, Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. Of course, Johnson left Michigan State after sophomore year. Most of these guys were going to the league when they were 21, 22 years old. They were men. Now, you're seeing guys go in 18, 19, 20. It's almost like, and I think this is as crazy as it sounds, a guy like Mason, who's older, went to a prep school, played 3 years in college. It's almost like if he decided to come back, they would have viewed him, next year as, wow, that guy's just too old. It just seems kind of crazy, but it just, the teams are picking so much on potential now. And upside, I can see where players feel like, well, I've got to come out now, because if I stay another year, they'll think I'm too old, which sounds crazy. because the NFL doesn't want to pick players until they're at least juniors because they want a bit of a finished product. And the same with Major League Baseball. They'll take guys out of high school, but after that, they want guys that are proven college players. And as we're seeing more and more college players taken in the Major League draft, it kind of astounds me that NBA teams, they're rolling the dice with these freshmen, I think, to a certain degree. And so I'm kind of surprised that they wouldn't like to have a system where guys are a bit older, but it's just not the way it is.
Let's wrap it up on a thought of football here, Bob, because I'm a little nervous as to whether or not there's going to be a game Saturday for Arkansas versus LSU because of, I think more than anything, contact tracing. I think we'll find out later today or tomorrow, I'm sorry, because the testing this morning, the results are supposed to come back tomorrow. I read in your SEC report that Missouri has 56 scholarship players available. That's only 3 more past, the threshold. I think for Arkansas, it's more about certain position groups, but this is the first week that that there's been thoughts that Arkansas may not play, and I wonder what your thoughts are about that.
Well, yeah, Sam Pittman has said repeatedly that those testing days, I think they get tested on Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday. Those are always very stressful, because you say, okay, well, everything's okay Sunday. When you get the test back Monday, everything's okay Wednesday when you get the test back Tuesday. But what could change between Tuesday and Thursday? You just don't know. And so, I know Hunter Yurchek told, Tom Murphy from our paper earlier in the week that he felt, good that they were going to have, enough players to play. I know Sam Pittman said yesterday he felt like they'd have an adequate number of players. Eli Drinkwitz told the media last week, and, he was just being truthful as he knew it. He thought Missouri would have enough players to play Georgia last week, and then it turned out they didn't. So, I think it was his Tuesday comments, he kind of hesitated and said, well, as of right now, we have enough guys, but, I don't want to speculate too much because, what happened last week. So, based on what Sam and Hunter said, I believe Arkansas will have enough guys to play, but, it's one of those keep your fingers crossed kind of deals, not just with Arkansas, really with everybody. UCA's game just got canceled with Louisiana Lafayette canceled their game with UCA because of COVID issues. So, it can happen, to anybody any week.
Bob, as always, appreciate the time. Thank you so much. Maybe I'll see you by the nut aisle again in the grocery store.
Thanks, Bob.
Okay, you guys take care.